you. Please be placed into conference.
Questions throughout the webinar. We have so many people listening, which is fantastic. We are going to take questions via the chat function, which is in the WebEx. So please feel free to send your questions as we go through the webinar, and we will be able to answer them as we go. And also, we've set aside specific time at the end so that we can make sure we get your questions answered or hear comments from you as well. So we want to begin our presentation on engaging parents and families on the Every Student Succeeds Act. Again, this is a joint webinar between the Council of Chief State School Officers and the National PTA, and we're so excited to have our partners at the PTA both on the phone and on this webinar to really help us out in making sure state education agencies and parents can be good partners in getting meaningful engagement on the Every Student Succeeds Act. So for today, we just started the webinar, and I'm providing the welcome and overview here. But after that, we're going to delve into a little bit of research that's out there on parent engagement and what are some things we know that parents really want to hear, but also some great ways to make sure parents are engaged in the conversation. After that, we're going to hear from parents directly. We're going to hear from Shannon Severe with the National PTA, who's going to provide some context on what the National PTA is working on and what would be good for parents in this conversation. And then we hear from two states. We have Erin Bensley with the Louisiana Department of Education and Gloria Ruiz from the New Mexico Public Education Department, here to talk about some of the ways that their states are engaging stakeholders, and mostly parents and families. And that way they can share out some ideas that they've been working on, some lessons learned, and some great things that states can put into practice going forward. And then at the end, we would really appreciate your questions. Again, I said we can take them throughout the webinar, but also have set aside some time so we can get to your questions or comments going forward as well. To get started, I do want to let you know that we have a website, ccsso.org, and we just released some new stakeholder engagement resources. And I know the PTA also has a great website, if you go to pta.org, that shares some resources as well. For our state members on the phone, I just wanted to make sure that you understood we had the Let's Keep This Conversation Going document that was released last week, as well as the Being in a Box toolkit. But I am going to turn it over to Erica Felker. And Erica is with HCN Strategies, and they've done a lot of work around the research behind parent engagement. They started this work a couple years ago, and Erica will be able to give you a little bit more context in that direction. So with Erica, I'm going to hand it over to you, and you are unmuted now, so you can go ahead and take charge. Just let me know when you want me to advance your slides.
Great, thanks, Melissa. I believe most of you on the phone probably already know me, but as Melissa mentioned, my name is Erica Felker. I work for a firm called HCN Strategies, and I've managed the research portfolio that we've done over the past 2 years, which was aimed at our understanding the parent mindset around the changes taking place in education. So you'll on the next slide that when a lot of work on behalf of various clients, and it's been a pretty good chunk of the country. To date, all of the research that I've done has combined to total, actually today it's probably almost 60 focus groups and multiple nationally representative surveys. And work first started with really trying to gauge how do we communicate standard and new aligned assessments in the first year of scores to parents. So this that you'll see in this survey deck really builds not only on our current day research focused on accountability and ESSA, but really builds on our comprehensive knowledge base that combines to form a really good understanding of how to talk to parents in general about education. And you can map that's on this slide really just shows where we've been instrumental in working with parks, marlins, or providing some kind of communication directly to the state education agency. And you can the current day ESSA research that we're doing. I just want to go back to some of the basic fundamentals that we learned in our initial round of cohort research. The fundamental point to remember when talking with parents is that they actually really have little information about what's going on in the classroom and in education today. We've seen this when it came to the standards, when it came to the tests, the scores, and now we're seeing it today with ESSA and accountability. And really a simple way to help give parents the information that they need is to include a cover letter with things that is sent home, whether it's an individual student report card, a school card, any new piece of paper, just to help parents understand what is it looking at, getting this, and what am I supposed to do with it. At the point that we see that cross not just student score reports and performance, but also into schools, is that than test scores. Talk with parents, they actually really tend to value test scores, which is contrary to what a lot of us may think, given sort of the negative sentiment on tests. But they see them, they just think that there's more to education than the test. And we've seen that's important to keep in mind is that when parents receive any type of information or information that isn't really what they had hoped to see, they really react in one of two ways. And we run two camps as problem solvers and protectors. First of all, one parent who we would call a problem solver, we talked to in New Mexico, was looking at a school report card and said, if you want to make me feel like I can do something about it, give me someone to call, which is really important when we think about the ESSA piece and the school report card, because it just illustrates how critical it is for us to make this something that's actionable and something that parents can really engage in so that they can make some improvements for their child. Next mental point that is really important to keep in mind is that the parent population, they're really coming from a place of frustration to begin with. And when we get the fact that they're just learning with different standards and methodologies and strategies in the classroom, we see parents who are frustrated. They're frustrated because they can't help their child, but they're also frustrated because they don't really know why things are different than from when they went to school. And when with the integration of technology into classrooms today, it leaves parents wondering in a big way, why? From what I experienced, I turned out fine. And you see, we had one mother in New York who said, my son does homework on his phone. How can you homework on your phone? And she was really saying that because she was a little surprised that her son lacked the skills to use an encyclopedia and went to his phone to search for something instead. So us on this call know that encyclopedias are very quickly becoming a thing of the past. So if it is better skilled at using Google to find their information, it's probably a much more useful tool, but none of that has really been effectively communicated to parents. And then when the lack of information has, it leaves opportunities for misperceptions to abound. And as you know, we saw this so much when it came to the standards, and it really continues today. And we have parents who really believe that the education policies that are entered in today's classroom are really created by corporations or politicians who don't have their child's best interests at heart. And then when we look at the fact that to date, the information that parents have received, either their child's and their child's performance or their individual school, has really not been timely. It's been hard to understand and not actionable. They don't really feel like they have a really good way to engage or activate or advocate on behalf of their child. Next slide. When we how parents view education and the school system, they see everything through the eyes of their child. So think of it as a series of concentric circles. At the very center is their child. And overall, their child is doing pretty well in school. They seem to be jolly, happy for the most part. Parents, they're good. And sort of one step out from that are teachers. Teachers have a direct impact, and they're interacting with and engaging with their child on a daily basis. But once we're talking about the school, the district, and the state, they're very, very much removed from what parents tend to prioritize and what they understand. So we had one parent who said, I don't necessarily care about the school. I want to know about my kids and my teachers. so for parents isn't quite as important as looking at their child's individual performance and their teachers. As parents about the district and the state, the majority of them had a really hard time even articulating what the difference in the roles and responsibilities of each agency was. So, We Heroes conducted a nationally representative survey of parents, and we some really, really shocking stuff. For the part, there is just a huge disconnect with how parents believe their child is performing, how they actually are. And stark contrast is obviously evident just by glancing at the bar graph. But overall, on average, about 90% of parents believe that their child is on grade level in math and English. And we know from the most recent NAEP data that number is closer to about 30%. And look at Hispanic and African American students, that gap grows even more. So what is, as we're into ESSA, you can move to the next slide. It means that for parents, there's a huge lack of demand. So another question that we ask parents is how they rate the education that their child is getting, and 3 and 4 of them stated that it was either pretty good or excellent. Think about this and with the previous slide, is that 90% of parents think their child is on track, and 75% of them think their child is getting a pretty good or excellent education. But to become clear as to why parents don't support that are taking place, because most of them don't actually see it's necessary. The child is doing okay and is on track and is really getting a good education. And this directly into what parents tell us they want to see on a school report card. So what we did in our research, we paraphrased in parent language various if that schools and states could report on report cards. And that when we asked parents if these indicators were something that they needed to know, would be nice to know, or that they didn't need to know, they were really stood out on top. None of which were academic data, because again, parents think that it is doing okay. That's not what they're concerned about. They're concerned about things that are kind of their control, but that they don't think are okay. So we see the qualifications, disciplinary data, and the school's learning environment were the top 3 that the majority of parents, I definitely want to see this on my kid's school report card. And then down, looking at the state and national NAEP scores and per pupil expenditure. We did whether or not they would want to know if the school was targeted or comprehensive support. And you see that there wasn't really a clear determination, but the thing that's tricky about that is it's really hard to really accurately communicate what the targeted or comprehensive support means, what schools fall into those categories, without really wonky and technical. And for our purposes, we just didn't really have time to get into that deep of a discussion in the group. So the one indicator, as you can see, parents said that really didn't need to know, which was the assessment data disaggregated by the subgroups. And there's a real caveat here, because we've only tested leaders with parents, had them stack rank them in the that we've done to date. So we worked with New Mexico and California, and we're currently working with the coalition in Ohio, DC, and we're trying to get a better read of this and understand that disaggregated data piece, because we all know it's a really important piece of an accountability system, and it should be very meaningful and actionable for parents. And I'll get into a little bit more detail on that in a couple of slides. But the point to make here is that overall, in every one of these indicators, over 70% of parents said that they were at least somewhat improved. So the trick is to figure out how do we prioritize what parents want to know with what they need to know, with overwhelming them and giving them every single thing and the kitchen sink that they think they want to know. Next slide. Kind of common sense, something that we take for granted when we say you shouldn't use policy or technical language when you talk to parents. But we found to actually take that one step farther. And you can see three phrases that are used pretty often among states when we talk about accountability that parents actually misinterpreted. So it really serves as a reminder that even when we think that parents may have the same interpretations and definitions of these indicators, that we still need to make attempts to define them for parents. So we are sure that everyone is interpreting it the same way. So for example, climate and culture, especially for Hispanic parents, they interpret this very, very literally. And student growth, which at least from perspective, I thought that was pretty self-explanatory, but we actually had parents who were ones that referred to the growth of the student population or the growth of the school budget overall. An opportunity to learn, which is an indicator that is specific to New Mexico, which in a few different measures, I believe it includes student absenteeism rate, the different instructional methods used by teachers, really gets at that non-academic piece. We test a model report card with parents in which a school performs pretty well in their school and student progress, but receives a very high grade in opportunity to learn. And the parent said, well, the school did best in opportunity to learn, so why aren't the kids learning if the opportunity is there? So really just a reminder to be careful about how we are conveying these things to parents. Next slide. And these four terms that we found are used pretty frequently but don't really resonate with parents. We and tested some language that we found resonates a little bit better. See, instead of opportunity to learn, we would recommend just using learn environment and then providing an accompanying definition that was a little bit more detail as to what the specific characteristics of a school are in our learning environment. And instead of the word growth, we're using progress. And that's actually something that was a suggestion from parents themselves. So we know they really understand what progress is. And then providing a definition to show what we mean by progress. And lastly, climate, we recommend using school environment instead and just kind of spelling out a little bit more what characteristics actually fall under school environment. Next slide. So data piece, it's seen so far is that it's really tricky for parents. When we share the disaggregation with parents, some parents who are members of minority communities couldn't a shaming exercise. So they see the data on paper and they really just see it as reinforcing something that they are, and that it's trying to state that there are certain groups of students that just aren't capable of achieving at the same level of others. Here, I mean, the verbatims that all came from New Mexico were pretty illustrative of just the emotions that it brought out in parents. So what it talks about homeless students and military parents, foster care, et cetera, that's just discrimination against people, and that should have no place in there. Another mode, it kind of makes you feel like if your child falls into a less group, then maybe not going to get the education they need. So this thing that we're trying to figure out, because I don't think that that there is no place for disaggregated data. It's really figuring out how do we contextualize it for parents? How do we understand why it's there, what it is, and what they should glean from this information? And we're in the process of creating some language that we're going to test in subsequent rounds of research and refine so that hopefully we can have something that contextualizes it while still resonating with parents. Next slide. The ultimate goal of all of this work that we're doing is create what we refer to as the blue school report card. And before we go into any detail about what you see on your screen, I just want to give a caveat that this is nowhere near final, and even looking at it in its current state, we know that there are still places that need to be changed and improved upon, but we are keeping a running tally of everything that we learn and all of the changes that need to be done in the report card based on what we learned. But I want to share this with you all just to really point out a couple of key places where our research and our findings really helped us and really are illustrated in this report card. So if you see the top, it does an overview that briefly explains what the purpose is and what parents are looking at, and also has the contact information for the school, which sounds so basic, but some of the versions that we've tested did not have that, and it was something that caught attention. The other found in our research, which I know is very controversial for states, the idea of a summative rating really resonates with parents. They're very familiar with things like percentages and letter grades, and it's very easy for them to glean information when they see that overall rating on the report card. And then the format of the report card, you'll notice we used 3 comparisons for each indicator because with parents, always said that seeing a state comparison was helpful. They wanted to see a district comparison even more because they see how their kids' school compared with those schools in their own community and their own neighborhood. So that's the visual and the format of the bar graph consistent for every indicator that we used. And for our non-academic indicator, you can see we did include learning environment because that was the top ranked indicator when we talked with parents. And the other about this is that you will see we do have the demographic information about the school, but we did not disaggregate the data for each indicator on here. And that's not to say that that has been placed in a report card meant for a parent, but because we don't prioritize it, we include it in sort of this overview snapshot at a glance level. So for example, if we're looking at student performance, a parent might, if this were web-based, click on student performance and then at another level get that disaggregated data. Or if there's a hard copy version, disaggregated data for each indicator might be on subsequent pages. So it was really an attempt to show how do we prioritize information and organize it so that parents can glean meaning from it. So, and that we all need to figure out is how do we meet parents where they are? And we'll be receiving 2 tools that is grounded in all of the research that I just gave you a glimpse of that are designed to help you as you're engaging parents around ESSA and the discussion framework. And these questions align to the areas of required feedback from parent families for ESSA and to help parents think about ESSA and accountability and school report cards in a way that makes it relevant to them. So thinking about how is my school doing? Well, what can be better done to serve the child? And taking it more broadly to what does the state need? What should goals be? And what are the supports and services that need to be implemented? Guidelines are also grounded in all of this research, and it's really an attempt to take everything that we've learned and turn to concrete guidelines that states can use when they're engaging parents around ESSA. So it includes tips and guidelines on how to talk about this stuff in a way that is parent-friendly, but more important, it's essentially make ESSA something that is local and not just something that's come out of Washington, D.C., miles and miles away from where their child goes to school. So we try to talk about it in a way that helps parents understand that it will impact their child and it will impact their school and the way that it will and what they can do to get involved. And the one last thing that I will say before closing is we've talked in different ways about accountability, but the one way that we have found really resonates is we frame it in the same way as their student's report card would be framed. So the same gets their report card, the evaluation is exactly why we are giving schools, evaluating schools, and giving them report cards to show the overall school's performance.
Yeah, Erica, really appreciate it. That was such great information in there. And again, we're recording the webinar and can make these slides available for you as well. One quick question, Erica, we had before we move on is just about that disaggregated data. You went over it in some good detail, but can you just touch on the research aspect of that? Was the response from parents to that disaggregated data consistent across racial groups and also for parents who have kids on IEPs or students with disabilities?
It was pretty consistent, which was surprising. And actually, in one of the groups, we had several parents who voiced that they had students with IEPs, and I was very interested in specifically about whether or not that data was relevant and why it was or wasn't. And we probed them further on that, and it still didn't seem to be relevant. And what they said is they know that their child has a learning disability, so they know from the get-go that their child is kind of working from behind. So seeing paper is just reinforcement of something that they already know, but they also didn't think that anything that they could do about it, that there wasn't really anything they could do to help their child, so they would rather just not see it because it's not really actionable. But again, something that we're continuing to dig into, and when we do have a better read on that, and if we do see patterns amongst parents from different subgroups or parents of kids with disabilities, we will definitely be sharing that information with you all.
Thanks, I really appreciate it. I'm going to turn the time over now to Shannon Sevier with the National PTA, and then your line's unmuted, and she's here to give us a little bit of perspective from the parents' point of view. Shannon, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you. First, I want to thank the Council of Chief State School Officers and Melissa for hosting this webinar today. We're so pleased to be partnering with you all so that we can ensure that families and parents are engaged on ESSA implementation and to ensure that their voices are heard at all levels during implementation. I want to thank you for highlighting the importance of authentic stakeholder engagement, and particularly for focusing on the role that parents and families can play by digging a little deeper into engagement strategies and what states are doing right now that's working and yielding results. Next slide, please. So the NAP's number one priority is to educate and empower families to be active participants at the federal, state, and local levels of ESSA implementation. Parents and children are consumers of our nation's public education system, and parents are essential partners in their child's education. However, they haven't always been included in decision-making. For this time, ESSA acknowledges the critical role that parents and other stakeholders play in student success, in school improvement efforts, education, by requiring that they are involved in the development of new education plans and the implementation of the law. So this opportunity for us to engage is huge, but we do know that across the board we've heard from PTA leaders that states are still struggling to engage all parents, and PTA want to be part of that solution. We need education leaders to partner with PTA to help reach families and ensure that parent voices are heard. To this end, National PTA has created and curated a wealth of parent-friendly resources and materials on the Every Student Succeeds Act, and those are housed on our ESSA webpage, which you can access at the link that's shown at the bottom of the slide, pta.org/ESSA. Slide, please. Also excited to announce today that we have added to these resources with the release of ESSA roadmaps. So this resource breaks down how parents and families can get involved in implementation at the state, local, and school level. Next slide. Through these maps, PTA members and parents can learn more about ESSA, take actionable steps to get involved in the process, and educate other parents and families about new law and how it will impact their child and their school. I really like the example that we saw from the presenter with the concentric circles, and that really resonates with me. And so as we push parents to get involved in far ripples from their child, I think we need to bolster them with more resources, which again you can find on our website, and then also need to inform state, local education leaders on what tactics they can use to kind of facilitate that process. And we're going to go into that with the next slide. Parents care about all aspects of their child's education, from their child's school environment and safety to their teachers, to standards and curriculum, and to social and emotional development. Next slide, please. You can see here what our priorities are. So having a dedicated parent representative, transparency, inclusion, high quality information, and multiple opportunities for input. Representatives on state level ESSA committees means that, or we think, should at least parent included who solely represents the parent voice. While we in some states they do count employees who are also parents fulfilling this requirement, we certainly urge state education agencies and leaders to have a parent representative that's not employed or affiliated with the school district. Item, transparency. We're on the right one. I'm sorry. Transparency. Does the state have an ESSA webpage that is easy to navigate? So in the interest of time, I'm going to jump straight into our examples, make sure that we can touch on everything. North Dakota Department of Public Instruction is very transparent about who the members of the ESSA committee are and identifies each of those stakeholders and the constituency that they serve with their contact information. And this is to facilitate communication and contact by other stakeholders and community members. So we think that's definitely a model that healthy and evidence of transparency. Inclusion is our next item. We're starting to see that several states post much in other languages, and some of those states include Ohio, Delaware, and North Carolina. It's important to consider whether they provide translation services and accommodations for individuals with disabilities, and whether or not they are attending to representative populations within their district. The next quality information, you can basically ask yourself, is the information provided easy to understand for parents and community members? Can they consume the information in the language that's provided, the terminology that's provided? Materials must be accessible and in terms parents can understand. The Education in Hawaii has provided a video overview of ESSA and a helpful IQ on ESSA and a 2-page fact sheet. So taken as a suite of resources, we think that that's an example of how to provide high-quality, accessible information. The next is multiple means for input. Is the state providing multiple opportunities? Is there a simple online survey? Is there a good point of contact or email address? For example, the Michigan Department of Education ESSA webpage has user-friendly tabs to show citizens development plans and notes and ways to find out more information and how to get involved. Options include signing up for virtual teacher and parent focus groups for educators and parents who may not be able to attend in-person meetings. There's another example that we'd like to highlight too, and this is coming from Oregon. They actually held 13 regional community forums throughout the state from March through June of 2016 to help inform the state plan. And second round of community conversations are taking place throughout this fall and winter. Next, practice. As mentioned earlier, there are multiple aspects of conducting effective stakeholder engagement, such as transparency, inclusion information, and multiple opportunities for input. Achieving perfection in all areas is challenging for any one state. We want to be part of the solution. We want state departments of education to partner with their state PTA. PTA are a valuable resource to be able to reach all families and ensure all parents are heard. That's why we've created the various ESSA roadmaps and are partnering with CCSSO to support this important work. In working with our state PTAs and throughout our collaboration, we've identified several best practices on engaging parents. Ensure at least one dedicated parent representative on any ESSA state-level committee. I mentioned before, and I just want to highlight that we definitely encourage states to have that representative be autonomous from affiliation or employment with the district. Part PTA, disseminate information on ESSA at any meetings, forums, or webinars. PTA is a trusted member messenger that can share information about the implementation process with families, encourage families to get involved and provide input. Ohio PTA is a great example of this. They shared numerous ESSA-related resources through their communications channel, and they have consistently encouraged parents and family members to participate in ESSA forums. PTA host ESSA-related forums. PTA has done this with their Department of Education. The forum was for parents, and they solicited feedback from them via a simple questionnaire that asked for their input on measures of school success and student and school support. Leverage parent leaders to gather input from other parents and families in the community. In fact, you could ask your state PTA to help gather input and feedback. Ask them to capture feedback from parents using the framework for meaningful parent discussion. You'll see that tool on our website. Make sure how parent input has been considered or incorporated in state plans and policies. And I think our colleague from Louisiana is probably going to highlight that in the next segment. I'd also like to mention that South Carolina has an online parent and student ESSA feedback form where they solicit specific input and feedback on topics in parent-friendly language. Ask that you build in structures and opportunities for ongoing engagement and feedback. The ESSA implementation process should just be the starting point or opportunity to engage parents and other stakeholders on education issues. In Connect, the superintendent established the Commissioners Roundtable for Family and Community Education, community engagement in education. Educators, students, and community members who serve as advisors to the Commissioner on matters of education. So you can see with all of these different ideas of what states are doing to help facilitate the process, there's a lot of work that we can do together in all of the states to move the needle on this and really maximize our engagement. So make sure that you go to pa.org/ESSA and see our resources and keep tabs on all of the different ideas and innovative ways that we are bubbling up from our states in the areas of engagement. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And I'll just say, I know Erica and Shannon both mentioned some resources that we have, and we'll get those out to our state members by the end of the day, and I know the PTA will be sharing them as well. And so those are coming to you. I want to hear from a couple states now and want them to share some of the things that they're working on. I'm going to turn it over first to Gloria Ruiz with the New Mexico Public Education Department. Gloria is the Family Engagement Coordinator there. And so, Gloria, if you want to share a few things that New Mexico has been working on to better engage parents.
Hi, thank you, Melissa. As Melissa mentioned, we have worked here at the department really looking to see how we could engage parents in just overall in how their feedback and overall just want to know what they needed in their communities. So before we actually went out and started conducting community meetings regarding ESSA, Alicia, teacher liaison, and myself decided to go out several communities throughout the state. We quickly realized most parents had no idea what ESSA was. Some have heard of it, others had not. And we started to learn some of the struggles that they faced in their communities. Here at the Public Education Department, we hosted a series of 6 meetings. We actually have last community meetings happening next week. And what we did to do is we do have 3 sessions that are held strict for ESSA stakeholder engagement. The day before, we hosted meetings for families, really just saying we're looking to get your feedback and not really calling it ESSA community meetings, but rather these are education conversations for families. Through these meetings, we really wanted to share information that parents needed to know. As Erica mentioned earlier, most parents, they're looking for information about their child, how their child's doing, how their school is doing. So as we looked at providing resources and supports and wanting to get feedback, we really looked at it through that lens. How are we talking about their child, and how are we talking about their school or their district? So in our meetings with parents, we start off with really the academic roadmap, providing resources that they should have in their hands if they've never heard of them. PTA Guides to Student Success was absolutely one of those. Parents have said they have not really understood or seen what the academic standards are for their child at that grade level. So that was one of the resources that we shared and provided, and was parents received that very well. We go through and talked about when we're thinking about parents, their concerns, and they really want, you look at their child, they look at their child's teacher. We wanted to have a conversation with them. Duran, our teacher liaison, was there as well. How do you talk to your teacher about some of these concerns that you're facing? So really our focus was on parents, their child, and supports that they need. So early on, some of the lessons that we learned is in order to really get meaningful feedback, we had the Secretary of Education present at most of these meetings, and we decided, in our later meetings that she was not going to be present or attend because it was mainly an advocate voice that was being present, and it really drowned out the voice of your parents that were wanting to get more information and learn. We also realized we have to have food. We definitely need to have food and activities for kids that are there. And early and really throughout communities, I would say one of the lessons we learned is that our RSV return rate was only about 25 to 30%. We may have had 30 RSVP'd and registered for the event, and only 10 show up. So I would say as you're engaging with parents and you're asking folks to come to some of the meetings, realize that you're going to get everyone there that RSVP'd, and plan for walk-ins as well. We identified a couple of questions, and these really went on. Early on, one of the lessons learned was we had way too much on the agenda to cover with parents. Keep it very simple, very concise, and only we had 4 questions we wanted to cover with parents and get feedback, and had to scale that back for time down to about 2. And those questions included, how do you feel your child's school is doing? What makes you say that? How do you know? And really trying to figure out what are some of the where they're receiving information, and what messengers, how do they like to receive that information? So in that, we're also able to provide feedback to our districts to say, here's what we're hearing from your parents, and they love receiving information via email. They like hard copies, really just depending on that community. What I found most interesting, so as we sat in community meetings, if parents did have questions specifically regarding ESSA, or they said, I want to hear more about ESSA, they always invited to the following day where these ESSA stakeholder meetings were taking place. So this was an opportunity, not intimidating, smaller groups where parents could come and share their feedback, and if wanted to receive more information or provide some additional feedback, we have opportunity for them to come the following day in the evening, and session open to parents, as well as taking an online survey. So they know of friends that would like to give their feedback as well. We do have an online survey in place that parents can go to and find more information there. What we realized early on is here at the State Department, we have not done a great job in communicating directly to our parents, and we can just listen to their feedback. So I would say is listening to feedback, whether it really relates to ESSA or not. It's always tough to cut off parents. You're going to have to let them vent, and that does take quite a bit of time. And as I mentioned, we did have to scale back what we had on the agenda, just allowing them that opportunity to share their concerns as well as sharing some ideas that they have on how they can best support their student and their school. Back in certain communities, they said, you know, we are so grateful that you're here, even if the conversation was negative or they were critical about some of the things that the current systems that we have in place. But they were just so grateful for the opportunity to come and share their voice and be heard. We are planning on going back, and early on we realized this. We've got to come back out. We've got to close with these communities, let them know what we did with their feedback. Is some information we learned that's being included in the state plan. Maybe it's something that has nothing to do with ESSA, and but yet it was information or great ideas that we're able to use here at the State Department in other ways. And one example of that is we had a parent say, you know, my teacher's fantastic, and why aren't we acknowledging some of these teachers that are going above and beyond? Can't we give them an award or a certificate? So that's something we are looking at doing, and a change that we can actually, and something we can deliver on pretty quickly here. As well as, you know, we have school grades in place. Looking at some of that language, how can we make it more family and parent friendly? So when we go back out to these communities, we go back with the work that was done while we were in the communities, as well as some of the actions that we've taken based on their feedback. So I would recommend a way, and we learned this early on, we have it initially in our plan to go back out, but we do want to be sure that we go out and close out with these communities. And I would say in Mexico, we had translators in many of our communities, and some we did need to use them, and others we did not. But make sure that you do have resources available, and PTA is great at providing this, and I know the Parents Guide to Student Success is available in Spanish as well. We took that with us, as well as your translator. So any resources, and in our communities, they love those hard copies, and also appreciated links to websites that are helpful as well. So those are some of the lessons that we learned, and that we are engaging with parents, and will continue to. This has been a very productive series of meetings that we've held, and we will continue to go out and engage with parents. We've realized we have to continue doing this more often.
Thanks, Glenn. I think that last part is so important, and I think the PTA would agree. But we've heard that from a number of states that they realize through this process, going back out and closing those feedback loops is really important. So thanks so much. We really appreciate your time in sharing some of that information. I think some other tips you provided that really stand out to me are providing food and activities for children as well. Those are both some great recommendations to make sure parents can attend. I know we're a little bit behind, but and want to save some time for questions, but I really want to hear from Erin from Louisiana. Lily's an assistant superintendent there, and Louisiana's done some great things around parent engagement. So, Erin, can you share some of the activities you've done and some of the things you're thinking about going forward?
Sure, thanks, Melissa. And let me first say that I have already learned so much from this webinar. I appreciate us being highlighted, but certainly there's a lot that I've taken from this conversation already that I'm looking forward to enhancing what we've done already. Engagement with families and with parents, and even as in the general public, really began for us this summer. Realized this law came about in the middle of a school year when many states, engaged in legislative sessions or elections, other things going on. So for us, really, these public conversations began this summer when, school's out, people were really looking forward to the next school year. It really gave us a nice space during the summer to really have some deep conversations with people about the state of education in our state and the opportunities available through ESSA. We began by having some one-on-one meetings first with a couple of key stakeholder groups, certainly educators who had a lot of very detailed questions about this new law and what it meant for them in terms of compliance and the accountability system. But we also met one-on-one with business and community leaders, civil groups, advocacy groups, And we held a special retreat with our own board members for our State Board of Education, recognizing that we are not the only communicators on this topic. It's just as important that we get our partners and our policymakers with the information they need, because sometimes our families go to them first. They always think, well, let me call the Department of Education when I have a question about this new law that I've heard about. It's important for us to have conversations with those key stakeholder groups at first. A couple of reasons. One, to make sure that we all share a general understanding of what ESSA is. For us generally about how we plan to approach the process of developing a plan in response to this new federal law. And then also to just hear from them about what questions they have. Before we even started planning our public meetings across the state, it was important for us to have those one-on-one conversations with these groups, many of which included parent representatives. Groups work directly with parents so that we can best prepare for those public conversations so that we do speak in the right terms and we do make things real for parents, that we don't just find ourselves in an auditorium in a community with, and use the typical education jargon and expect that that's going to be of interest or relevant to non-educators in the room. So they're very helpful. After we had those very informative meetings, we then planned and published a series of public notices for public meetings across the state. And we didn't just say, hey, we're coming to your town to talk about ESSA. So, people may not get as excited about that as we would as people who work in education. But we communicated this as a conversation about our public schools. And let's talk about education in Louisiana. Hear from you. We want to talk to you about what's working and be honest about what's not working and talk about how we can make improvements. So we approached this as not just a series of steps to comply with the new federal law, but here's an opportunity to have a conversation about where we are, how we are doing students well, where we have continuing challenges, and talk about the future of our state plan and how we can use this new federal law to advance that plan and to do what we're doing even better. Seeing successes, how do we continue that? Where we are not seeing success and where we still have challenges, how do we use the very provisions of ESSA or the grant programs associated with ESSA to begin making improvements. A series of public meetings across the state that's to communicate those using local radio, press releases, contacting local organizations and asking them to invite their members and families to these public conversations. These were all led by our state superintendent. And I mentioned we really just use this as a conversation to talk about where do we stand right now in education and to really make that, to put in context, not to just put a lot of numbers and percentages up on a PowerPoint, but talk about how are our children performing relative to their peers in other states. And we also had very frank discussions about what is a good school, how to know a good school when you see it, what are the things that happen within the school building, and what should we expect as in terms of quality and excellence. So we had a lot of very frank conversations about where our children performing as compared to where we need to be or where we need them to be, and really how do we connect that to ultimately having them prepared with the knowledge and skills that they need to from grade level to grade level and ultimately to be successful be high school. I really tried to speak all this in terms that parents could understand, just talking about, for example, college and career readiness, but what does that really mean? That means that your child is receiving instruction and the supports that he or she needs to continue progress from year to year and ultimately graduate from high school with the knowledge and skills to be successful in college without the need for remediation, also successful in the world of work as they transition beyond high school. We received a lot of input from participants, everything from discipline to special education services to the need for more physical activity during the school day. And we expected, this is a conversation to basically tell us what's on your mind as parents. Where do you see things going well? Or do you have some concerns? Really just introductory meetings that had I got goals in mind. One is to share information with them, but also just give them an open forum to provide input to us about where we see improvements and we think things are going well. Use this as an opportunity to gut check that with parents. Given the data and the numbers that we follow, this means one thing to us, but how are you seeing this play out in your school and ultimately with your child? Where do you see that things are going well, and where would you have us focus our attention in order to improve public education in our state? We have meetings, sharing some information with them, directing them to our website, which we devote an entire page just to ESSA, where we are housing all of the documents that we're preparing and all of the presentations we've given on this topic. We also shared a one-page front and back, just a very quick ESSA 101. It has a little bit of information there on ESSA, but also information about where we stand now with our public education system, where we're doing well and where we have continuing challenges. And we had participants to remain in contact with us even after these meetings. Gave them an email address to send any follow-up questions or to tell us where, if they didn't speak up at one of the meetings, if they wanted to, with someone from the department afterwards, if they wanted to send us directions or thoughts, maybe something that, they didn't get an opportunity to express, or they thought that something was maybe missing in the discussion, we have that available for them to remain in contact with us. Some of them have, and we make a point to check that email address every day to make sure that if someone is just saying, here's an article that we think you guys should consider, even if it's not a question, we acknowledge every email, we respond to every person. We have someone checking that every day, and that's been very helpful to remain in contact with people. Following these meetings, one thing that we heard is that it's great to have these introductory conversations to share information and to give people an opportunity to input to us. Got to a point where after going through what I keep referring to as the ESSA 101, people wanted to really get into the next level of detail. So we have new law, we have these opportunities, we have these requirements. How do you pull all that together into a state plan going forward? What is this really that we're going to do differently as a state? And what does that mean for my school? And ultimately, what will I see different occurring in my child's classroom? And we received that feedback not only from parents, but also from educators, to get to that next level of detail. So what we did to respond to that and to really lead us to the next phase of stakeholder engagement is to we released two documents. One was a very brief document that summarized the major themes that we heard as we conducted this statewide tour. This was a lengthier document that we released. We called a draft framework. This is available on our website as well. It's about a 10-page document that for every area where we had identified a challenge within our state, we proposed some options for consideration. So for one challenge that we identified is increasing the teaching profession in our state, addressing the needs of new teachers coming into our classrooms and also supporting our existing educators and school leaders. We took the to not put out a draft plan, and it was a little too early for that, but just to give people something to react to say, given where we are in our state, given these new requirements and new opportunities through this federal law, what we're considering, things that we should continue to talk about throughout the next several months to address what we know are our top challenges in our state. So this document is a pretty detailed document, but we included a section under each challenge. We attempt to really make this real for families, which is always difficult, especially when you're talking in terms of state accountability systems and compliance-related issues. We still felt like it was to make this a document that parents can pick up and read, ultimately understand how this will affect the quality of education and supports that the child is receiving in their schools. So we've begun to go out to a second tour on this framework document, soliciting input of what people think about this. And we've been very clear that this document is just a conversation starter, because it is very hard for people to, what we found is it was hard for people to really express this is how we believe that our state education system should change in the future. But what they did feel a lot more comfortable doing is to say, you've put ideas on the table in front of me, and now I'm going to give you my candid feedback as to what I like and what I don't like. So, we've told people that's exactly the purpose of this document. Feel free to tear it apart. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you don't like. There's an iterative process that we'll be engaged with stakeholders over the next few months to really get to hopefully some agreement on what options we should be exploring, what are the changes that we should be considering, and ultimately we craft the best plan to serve our students going forward. So, a very helpful document to get us to the next stage of conversation. We'll really start talking in details. As I mentioned, the challenge here is to make sure that as we go deeper in detail, that we are still always conscious of the fact that we are speaking to multiple audiences and making this relevant for both educators and non-educators, and make sure that as we communicate with families that they really see this affects their child's school.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate that. I think you had some great points there, especially on how you guys are going out for that second round of feedback. That's so important, and I know that something parents really care about is feedback loop and making sure that they understand how their comments were taken into account. We are over time here, and I'm so sorry that we went over, but we had such great information to share, both from the PTA, from Erica at HCM, and from our two states, and we so appreciate you all being on the phone to listen, and most of you have stuck with us half the hour here. Really appreciate that. A couple just key takeaways, and then we'll wrap this up. One person sent me a message that just said, it seems like taking the education ease and making language easier for parents is really a crucial component here, and it is. And I think if we take nothing else away from this webinar, hopefully we'll go back and review all of our ESSA-related materials, and frankly any other materials we have, and really make them more user-friendly and accessible for all parents and families and students, so that they can engage in this process with us. And secondly, I would just say that as the PTA said, they want to be a partner in this effort, and I know SEAs want to be a good partner on this too. So trying to find groups like the National PTA, your state PTA chapter, or even groups like the Urban League has reached out to me, NCLR, the National Council of ESSA. They all want to be good partners in this and find some great parents, communities, and other folks to join you at your meetings and really give you some feedback. So for this out there who are looking for some good partners, those are a few groups. Just a last reminder that we'll be sending out those new tools and resources to you soon. I hope to get out to you later this afternoon. but if not, you'll see them first thing in the morning. So thank you to everyone on the call today and on the webinar. We really appreciate you sharing this information, and this will not be the last time we connect with you. So thanks again to the National PTA for jointly hosting this webinar with CCSSO. We appreciate it, and I hope everyone has a great afternoon. Thanks so much.